The Pacific Ocean covers 1/3 of the surface of the Earth. It is larger than every continent combined. For most of the last 50 years, it was treated as empty space on the strategic map, a place power passed through, on its way to somewhere else. That era is over. It ended in a single week. At 1 minute past noon, Beijing time on July 6, 2026, somewhere beneath the South China Sea, a Chinese nuclear-powered submarine received an authenticated launch order. A ballistic missile broke the surface of the ocean. It crossed the northern coastline of Luzon in the Philippines. It flew more than 7,000 kilometers across the open Pacific, over the waters of Micronesia, Nauru, Kiribati, and Tuvalu. And it came down between Nauru and Tonga, inside a nuclear-free zone that China itself signed protocols to in 1987. New Zealand was told the launch was coming, hours before it happened. That same morning in Suva, under ceremony in Kava, two prime ministers were signing a treaty, the Ocean of Peace Alliance, the first formal defense alliance in Fiji's history, only the fourth in Australia's, after the United States, New Zealand, and Papua New Guinea. Its core clause, an armed attack on either nation in the Pacific is a threat to the other. 3 days later, New Zealand's Prime Minister stood before cameras in Wellington and said his country would now consider joining. 1 week, one treaty, one missile, one choice. For decades, the South Pacific sat at the margins of world politics. This documentary is about the week the margins ended and what it means for the 20 million people who call these islands home. Because before this is a story about great powers, it is a story about small nations deciding who they can trust with their future. Begin with what was actually signed, because the details matter more than the headlines. On July the 5th and 6th, Anthony Albanese and Sitiveni Rabuka signed two agreements in Suva. The first, the Vuvale Union, covers climate, economy, and development. Vuvale is the Fijian word for family. The second, the Ocean of Peace Alliance, is the defense treaty. Its confirmed provisions, both nations commit to consult whenever security developments threaten either country's sovereignty, peace, or stability. An armed attack against either party in the Pacific is regarded as a threat to the other, with both committed to act in accordance with their constitutional processes. That language deliberately echoes ANZUS, the 1951 treaty that anchored Pacific security for 70 years. This is a mutual defense commitment, not a memorandum, not a partnership statement, an alliance. Alongside it, more than $1 billion Australian dollars over the next decade for policing, transnational crime, healthcare, and infrastructure. Money that lands not in ministries alone, but in hospitals in Suva, in patrol boats on the outer islands, in the daily security of communities whose greatest threats are not armies, but drug transshipment, illegal fishing, and the rising sea. And one provision that may prove the most consequential of all, the treaty is open-ended. Other Pacific nations can join. Pacific Affairs expert Tess Newton-Kane noted the clause is aimed squarely at the nations with standing militaries, Papua New Guinea and Tonga, and as of this week, New Zealand. Then came the question everyone in the region was already asking. Why would Fiji, of all nations, sign this? The answer is a 20-year story. In 2006, Commodore Frank Bainimarama seized power in a military coup. Australia and New Zealand imposed sanctions. Fiji was suspended from the Pacific Islands Forum. Isolated by its traditional partners, Bainimarama turned to the one major power that asked no questions about coups: China. Beijing invested in Fijian infrastructure, provided economic lifelines, and built a relationship that made Fiji, for a period, China's closest partner in the South Pacific. Then in December 2022, Sitiveni Rabuka returned to office. Rabuka, himself a former coup leader from 1987, now returned as an elected prime minister, reversed the orientation. He suspended Fiji's police cooperation agreement with China. He restored the traditional partnerships with Canberra and Wellington. And in 2025, asked about a permanent Chinese military presence in the South Pacific, he answered with a bluntness rare in Pacific diplomacy, "If they want to come, who would welcome them?" not Fiji, and I think that China understands that well. The Ocean of Peace Alliance is the culmination of that reversal, but Rabuka has been equally clear about what the treaty is not. Asked whether Beijing would see it as a snub, I do not expect China to have any severe pushback. It does not threaten Fiji's relationship with China. Hold both of those statements in your mind at once. Not Fiji and no threat to China. That is not contradiction. That is the entire operating system of Pacific diplomacy in 2026. Security partnership with the West, economic engagement with Beijing, and maximum agency in between. The question this documentary keeps returning to is whether that balance can survive the decade. Now, the missile. The People's Liberation Army Navy confirmed the launch in an official statement. It's self-extraordinary because Beijing almost never announces its missile tests. A strategic nuclear submarine, a long-range missile, a dummy warhead, landing, in the Navy's words, precisely within designated waters. Routine annual training, the statement said, directed at no one. Independent analysis told a more detailed story. Taiwan's National Security Council identified the missile as a JL-2, range roughly 7,200 to 8,000 kilometers, and published its flight path. Launched in the South China Sea, over Luzon, across the exclusive economic zones of 4 Pacific nations. According to a regional official cited by CNN, down between Nauru and Tonga. Aerospace analyst Jonathan McDowell fitted the trajectory from navigational warnings, a full arc exceeding 7,300 kilometers. Understand what that test actually validated. A submarine missile launch is not a button press. It is a chain, an authenticated nuclear launch order reaching a submarine at depth, the boat fixing its own position to targeting precision, underwater ejection, boost, intercontinental flight, precision impact. China demonstrated that entire sea-based nuclear chain, publicly, for only the second time in the Pacific since 1980. And the timing was layered, the same day the treaty was signed in Suva, the opening day of China's joint naval exercise with Russia, the eve of the NATO summit in Ankara. Here, this documentary must be precise, because precision is the difference between analysis and insinuation. A test of this complexity is planned weeks or months ahead. It was almost certainly not a reaction to a treaty signed that morning, but notification was a choice. China informed New Zealand, Japan, Taiwan, and Australia, hours before launch. Reportedly, not the United States. Whether the date was coincidence or signal, the effect was identical. Every government in the South Pacific lived the same 24 hours. A new Western alliance by morning, and a Chinese ballistic missile in their neighborhood by midday. And beneath the strategy, 20 million people in Fiji, in Tonga, in Kiribati, in Tuvalu, watch the governments of the world's most powerful nations conduct their competition across the waters their families have fished for 3,000 years. New Zealand's Foreign Minister Winston Peters confirmed the missile landed inside the South Pacific Nuclear Free Zone, established by the 1986 Treaty of Rarotonga. China signed its protocols in 1987. Peters' statement, "We, like our neighbors, have no interest in China using the South Pacific as a testing site for missile capability. We as a region should not sit by and allow such tests to become normalized or routine." The fairness point, which this channel always makes. Missile tests are routine for nuclear powers. The United States tested Trident missiles 4 times off Florida last September, India in December, Russia in October. What made this test different was not that it happened, it was where it landed, and what had been signed that same morning. 3 days later, on July 9th, New Zealand's Prime Minister Christopher Luxon announced that New Zealand will consider joining the Ocean of Peace Alliance. Cabinet will decide. For New Zealand, this engages every tension in its strategic identity at once. New Zealand is bound to Australia through ANZUS, though the American leg of that treaty has been suspended for New Zealand since its nuclear-free stand of 1986. It is a Five Eyes member, its largest trading partner is China, and its national identity, for 40 years, has been built on the conviction that its corner of the ocean should be free of nuclear weapons. Last week, a ballistic missile fired from a nuclear submarine landed in that corner of the ocean. Joining the alliance would be the most significant New Zealand security decision in a generation. Declining, days after that missile, would send its own signal. There is no neutral option. There is only a choice. Now widen the lens, because Fiji is one move in a sequence. June 2026. Australia and Vanuatu sign an agreement barring any foreign military base in Vanuatu. China's response, a warning against geopolitical games. July 8th. The Puk-Puk Treaty with Papua New Guinea enters into force. May 2026. The Solomon Islands elects Matthew Whale, who immediately begins reviewing the 2022 Security Pact with Beijing, the pact that started this entire cycle. And now Fiji, with a treaty built for others to join. Step back and the architecture is visible. Australia is constructing, treaty by treaty, nation by nation, a Pacific security network with itself at the hub. The purpose is not concealed. After 2022, a permanent Chinese military presence in the South Pacific stopped being theoretical for Australian planners. Every agreement since has been designed to close that possibility. China's position, stated consistently and presented here fairly. It opposes security blocs it views as Cold War instruments. Its Pacific engagement is development. Stadiums, hospitals, roads, government buildings, hundreds of millions of dollars across the islands. And in Beijing's view, it is Australia militarizing the region, not China. Kiribati, the Solomon Islands and Nauru have all switched recognition from Taiwan to China in recent years. The competition is real. It is conducted through checkbooks and treaties alike. And the nations of the Pacific are not passive terrain. They are players, extracting value from both sides, exercising what analysts now call pragmatic sovereignty. The skeptics challenge. First, is this alliance meaningful or symbolic? Fiji's military numbers roughly 3,500 personnel. The honest answer, the treaty's value is not Fijian capacity. It is geographic denial, guaranteeing Fijian ports and waters stay inside the Australian network and outside any future Chinese one. Second, did the missile answer the treaty? The test was planned long in advance. The date was almost certainly coincidence. The notification pattern was not. Say both. Claim neither more. Third, will New Zealand join? Genuinely unknown. Its nuclear-free identity and China trade pull one way. The missile in the nuclear-free zone and alliance solidarity pull the other. Cabinet will decide, and analysts disagree on the outcome. What we know. Treaty signed July 5th and 6th. Confirmed. Mutual Defence Clause. Open accession. 1 billion Australian dollars. Confirmed. JL-2 test July 6th, 1 minute past noon. Confirmed by the People's Liberation Army, Navy's own official statement. Flight path per Taiwan's National Security Council. Landing in the nuclear-free zone, confirmed by New Zealand's Foreign Minister. Luxon, July 9th. New Zealand will consider joining. Confirmed. What we do not know. Whether New Zealand joins, whether Tonga and Papua New Guinea follow, whether Beijing answers with deeper engagement, further signaling, or both. Whether pragmatic sovereignty, security west, economics east, can survive a decade like this one. The most defensible assessment is this. The Pacific Ocean has not moved. It is where it has always been. 1/3 of the Earth, the water between the powers. What moved is everything else. The treaties, the missiles, the money, the attention of every capital that matters. For 70 years, the nations of the South Pacific lived at the edge of the world's strategic map. In 1 week in July 2026, they found themselves at its center. History is shaped by decisions. Geography is permanent. Politics is not. The South Pacific did not witness a series of unrelated events last week. It crossed a threshold, and thresholds, once crossed, do not uncross. The question the region now faces, the question New Zealand now faces, is not whether the new era has arrived. It is what kind of era it will be. I am the Anglosphere Report, connecting the stories shaping the Anglosphere and the world. Tell me in the comments, especially if you're watching from New Zealand. Should New Zealand join the Ocean of Peace Alliance? Or does independence serve it better? See you next time.